Take your things and leave, Margaret said, her voice as steady as if she were reading a grocery list. She slid a black trash bag across the kitchen floor with the tip of her shoe. The bag slumped against the cabinet, flimsy and pathetic, and I couldn't believe she was serious. What? I whispered, staring at her, then at the bag. Her fingers clattered across the calculator in her lap, nails tapping the buttons like she was reconciling an account. 18 years, Adam. 18 years of checks. $1,500 a month. Reliable income. But today, your birthday, the payments stop. I laughed, short and broken. You're telling me this now? On my birthday? Across the table, Daniel cleared his throat. He stared at his hands folded in his lap, the same way he always did when Margaret took control of a conversation. He'd taught me how to change oil, rebuild carburetors, patch a roof. Useful skills, sure. But looking at him now, I realized it hadn't been love. It had been free labor, keeping me busy, keeping me out of their way. The adoption subsidies end when you're 18. That was the arrangement, Margaret said flatly, eyes lifting from the calculator just long enough to pin me with that icy gray stare. Food, clothes, a roof, school. We provided all of it. Contract fulfilled. I'm not a contract, I said, my legs trembling. I'm your son. No, she corrected, pulling a neatly tabbed folder from the counter. You were the state's responsibility, temporarily placed with us. You were never ours. She opened the folder, flipped to a highlighted page, and slid a pamphlet across the table. There's a shelter downtown. They take adults 18 and older. Address is marked. A shelter. A homeless shelter. That was her solution. Please, I said before I could stop myself, voice cracking like a child's. Just give me a week. I'll figure something out. I'll pay you rent. She snorted. With what? That part-time garage job? 30 hours a week at minimum wage won't cover market rate. She was right. She was always right about numbers. But she'd never been right about people, never about love. Daniel finally moved, his chair scraping back. Margaret, maybe we could. Mortgage is due tomorrow, she snapped, shutting him down with a glare that had silenced him 1,000 times before. His room's already listed on Craigslist. Someone's coming by this afternoon. My room. I choked out. It was never yours. It was space we provided. Temporary. Daniel stood abruptly, grabbed his keys, muttered something about work, and slipped out the door. The sound of his truck rumbling away felt like the final nail, sealing me outside of the only home I had ever known. I walked to the bag, lifted it. It weighed almost nothing. My whole life reduced to a sack of clothes, a couple of books, my toothbrush, the cheap watch my boss had given me for Christmas. Nothing from Margaret or Daniel. No photos, no keepsakes. No proof I'd ever been their child. Was I anything to you? I asked, gripping the plastic so tightly it crinkled. In 18 years, was there a single moment where I meant more than a number on your calculator? She looked at me then, and for the briefest heartbeat, something flickered in her eyes. But it vanished. She glanced at her wristwatch and said, We never starved you. Never hit you. We met every requirement. That's more than some kids get. That should be enough. It wasn't. It never could be. I swallowed hard, tears burning but refusing to fall. Goodbye, Margaret. Not Mom. Never again. She was already bending back over her folder, neat rows of figures waiting to be tallied, her life uninterrupted. And I stepped out the door with a garbage bag in my hand, 18 years behind me, and nothing ahead but the terrifying freedom of being truly, devastatingly alone. Sit down, Adam, Margaret said without glancing up from her calculator. Her voice was sharp, practiced, like she was managing a meeting instead of speaking to the boy she'd raised. The kitchen table was buried beneath stacks of papers, bank statements, and color-coded folders. Numbers marched across the sheets in precise columns, as if my entire life could be reduced to a ledger. I sat because that's what you did in our house. You obeyed, you followed rules, you didn't waste energy asking why. But my stomach tightened. Something in the air felt heavier than usual, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Today's the end of it, Margaret continued, flipping a page. 18 years. The subsidies stop now. What subsidies? My voice cracked halfway through, like I was 13 again. Daniel shifted beside her, the chair legs groaning against the tile. He kept his eyes on the table, thick fingers knotted together, knuckles pale. His work shirt was already tucked in, steel-toe boots laced tight. He looked ready to leave, like he always did when Margaret started down this path. The checks, she said simply, tapping her calculator. $1, $500 a month. For 18 years. Do the math. The number hit me like a punch. I did the math anyway because that's how my brain worked, even while it was collapsing. $324,000. That's what I'd been worth to them. No, I said, shaking my head. No, you're wrong. You adopted me. You raised me. Margaret finally looked up, her gray eyes as flat as the beige walls surrounding us. We agreed to house you in exchange for compensation. Food, clothes, schooling. Everything you needed was provided. We met the state's requirements. That's all. That's not all. I snapped, but my voice sounded small, childish even. I'm your son. Her pen tapped against the folder. You were a ward of the state. Don't confuse obligation with family. My chest tightened so badly I thought I might actually pass out. I turned to Daniel, desperate for something, anything. A word, a look, a shred of loyalty. He finally spoke, voice low, almost apologetic. Maybe we could give him a week, Margaret. Just until he. Her glare cut him in half. He folded instantly, sinking back into his chair like a balloon losing air. That was Daniel, strong enough to carry lumber all day, too weak to stand against her for even a moment. Margaret slid a black trash bag across the floor with the toe of her shoe. It sagged against my foot. Your belongings. Personal items only. Anything else stays here. You need to be gone by noon. The plastic crinkled as I pulled it open. Clothes. A few books. My toothbrush. The watch Mr. Jennings from the garage had given me for Christmas. That was it. 18 years distilled into a sack that weighed less than 10 pounds. I wanted to scream. To demand an explanation. To shake her until something, anything, human broke through that icy shell. Instead, I whispered, "Where am I supposed to go?" Margaret slid another paper across the table. A pamphlet. She'd highlighted an address. There's a shelter downtown. They accept adults 18 and over. A shelter, I repeated, my throat burning. You've had 18 years to prepare, she said. Don't act surprised. I'll pay rent, I begged, hating myself for the desperation spilling out. I've been saving. I have a job. Your garage job? 30 hours at minimum wage won't cover market rent. She said it like she'd already run the calculation, like she'd checked the numbers 10 times. Of course she had. Margaret never spoke without proof. Daniel shoved his chair back suddenly, the noise startling. I'm heading to work, he muttered. He grabbed his keys from the hook by the door, hesitated just long enough to glance my way, then disappeared. The rumble of his truck faded until the house was silent again. I turned back to Margaret. Was I ever anything to you? I asked, voice shaking. Even once. Did you ever feel something? Her eyes flicked up from the calculator. For one fleeting second, something shifted, something almost soft, almost real. Then she looked at her watch and the moment evaporated. We never hit you, she said. Never starved you. You had a roof, food, and education. That's more than many kids get. It was enough. It wasn't. Not then. Not now. Not ever. I tightened my grip on the trash bag until the handles dug into my palms. Goodbye, Margaret. Not Mom. She'd never earned that word. She was already bending back over her numbers, neat lines of ink and figures swallowing her attention. Her world carried on, orderly and precise, as though 18 years of my existence were just a line item marked complete. I stepped outside with my garbage bag, the door clicking shut behind me. The sky stretched wide and merciless above, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't in anyone's ledger. I wasn't a line of profit. I wasn't a calculation. I was alone, terrifyingly, painfully, completely free. I don't understand, I said, though the truth was already sliding into place, sharp edges cutting through every memory I thought I could trust. You raised me. I've called you Mom and Dad for 18 years. How can you just throw me out? Margaret finally set her pen down, her calculator still glowing with numbers. She looked at me the way she might study a receipt, cold, clinical, weighing whether the expense had been worth it. You're legally an adult now, Adam. We have no further obligation. Keeping you here complicates our taxes. The subsidy ended at midnight, and without it, you're no longer an asset. You're a liability. A liability. An asset. I wasn't a son. I was a line item, a car that had been driven past its value. Please, I said, my knees buckling before I even realized I was kneeling on the linoleum I'd scrubbed every Saturday for years. My voice broke. I'll get a full-time job. I'll pay rent. I'll buy my own food. Just give me a month. Please. Daniel kept his eyes on the wall, studying it like the beige paint had suddenly become fascinating. Margaret only tapped her finger against the clock on the wall. It's 9:47. You have until noon. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. I stayed there on the floor, waiting for one of them to break. For Daniel to step in. For Margaret to look at me with something resembling warmth. Neither happened. Margaret went back to her calculator, and Daniel walked around me to pour another cup of coffee, careful not to touch me. When I finally stood, my legs trembled. 18 years, I said, my voice shaking. 18 years of calling you my parents. Doesn't that mean anything? You were well cared for, Margaret replied, her tone flat. You had meals, proper clothing, public education. You saw doctors and dentists when required. You received everything the state expected us to provide. What about love? I asked, the words so soft I barely heard myself. For a fraction of a second, her fingers hesitated above the calculator. Then she pressed another button and said, Love doesn't pay mortgages. I stumbled into the bedroom that had been mine. The walls were bare because Margaret never allowed posters or personal touches. My clothes were already divided into piles. The things I'd bought went into a garbage bag. The things they had paid for stayed behind. The laptop I'd used for homework stayed. It had been purchased with school funds. The alarm clock stayed because it came with the room. Even the baseball glove Daniel had given me when I was 12 was off limits. He hadn't bought it out of affection. It had been required for gym class. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Brown hair, brown eyes, average build. A face so ordinary it could dissolve into any crowd. Maybe that was why it had been so easy for them. I was generic enough to fit their beige life without leaving a mark. Back in the kitchen, Margaret was on the phone. Yes, the room will be ready this afternoon. $450 a month, utilities included. First and last up front. She was already renting out my space. Already replacing me. Who were my real parents? I asked suddenly. Margaret covered the receiver with her hand. Does it matter? They gave you up. We're doing the same. Consistency. You know who they were? The state provided medical histories for insurance purposes. Nothing else was relevant. She returned to her call, ending the conversation. Daniel shuffled in from the garage, a folded $20 bill in his hand. He didn't meet my eyes as he pressed it into my palm. For food, he mumbled. Until you get settled. $20. After 18 years. After more than 300,000 collected in my name. I wanted to rip it up, throw it in his face, but hunger and fear made me close my fist around it instead. At exactly noon, Margaret stood by the front door, holding it open like she was showing a guest out. Time's up. We have appointments this afternoon. I picked up the garbage bag, surprised again at how light it was. My life reduced to almost nothing. I stopped before stepping outside. Did you ever think of me as your son? Her eyes were cold as steel. I thought of you as my responsibility. I fulfilled it. The door shut behind me with a click. I heard the deadbolt slide, then the chain lock. That was it. Final. The sound of lawnmowers and kids playing floated from neighboring yards. Families being families in ways I would never understand. I stood on the sidewalk, $20 in my pocket, a garbage bag in my hand, and no plan but the shelter pamphlet already damp with sweat in my palm. The address was downtown. An hour's walk if I didn't stop. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. You're no longer on our family plan. Service ends at midnight. Plan accordingly. Even my phone had been scheduled for termination. 3 months later, June 20th, I was sitting on the steps outside the Dallas Public Library. My spot, where the cameras didn't quite reach, where the guards ignored you as long as you looked clean enough. The shelter had taught me appearances mattered. Wash in cold water even if it stung. Shave with the cheap razors. Keep your clothes neat even if you had to scrub them in a public restroom. That morning, a man in a gray suit walked straight toward me. Instinct made my stomach clench. Men in suits usually meant cops, social workers, or debt collectors. None of them good. But this man moved like he already knew me. Adam Walker? He asked, pulling a leather wallet from his pocket. My first instinct was to run. Months on the street had drilled that reflex deep. But something in me had snapped the night Margaret locked the door. I was tired of running, tired of being nobody. Depends who's asking. My name is Vincent Morales. I'm a private investigator. He handed me a business card, thick cardstock, embossed lettering. The real thing. I've been looking for you for 3 months. Your biological father hired me years ago, but the records were sealed. When you turned 18 and started applying for jobs, your social security number gave us a lead. The words hit harder than Margaret's rejection. Biological father. Vincent lowered himself onto the step beside me, not caring that his expensive suit brushed against the dirty concrete. That small act of sitting down, equal, unbothered, meant more than he knew. His name was Thomas Brennan, Vincent said softly. He's been searching for you since the day the adoption papers were signed. My chest tightened. Why isn't he here? Vincent's eyes softened in a way that made my stomach drop. I'm sorry. He passed away last week. Heart attack at his office. He was still looking for you when it happened. The words spun in my head. He'd been searching for me all this time, and I never even knew. I had spent 90 days imagining versions of this moment. Dreams where someone appeared out of nowhere and said I mattered, where someone claimed me, fought for me, loved me. And now, it had finally happened. Only the man who had searched for me all these years was already gone. Vincent held out a tablet, swiping to a photo. This is him, Theodore Brennan. My breath caught. The man staring back at me could have been my reflection 30 years from now. Same dark eyes, same crooked nose, same square jawline. But where my gaze was dulled by exhaustion, his looked fierce, alive. He was dressed in a tailored suit in front of a towering glass building with Brennan Energy Corporation engraved above the doors. Energy? Oil, I muttered, remembering the old mechanic at the shop joking that I must have oil in my blood. Founder and CEO, Vincent said. He started with a single well 2 decades ago, turned it into a national powerhouse. He never married, never had other children. He told me he couldn't, not until he found you. Then why did he give me up? The question clawed its way out, bitter and burning. Vincent swiped again, showing me an older photo. The image was faded, grainy, but clear enough to see a young man barely into his 20s cradling a newborn. He was 22 when you were born. Your mother, Emily Carter, died during delivery. Unforeseen complications. Theodore's parents pressured him relentlessly. They told him he was too young, too unprepared, that the baby would be better off with a married couple. In his grief, he signed the adoption papers. Within a week, he regretted it. I clenched my fists. A week? And it took him 18 years to reach me. He tried immediately to reverse the adoption, but you'd already been placed with the Walkers. Records were sealed. He spent 18 years and millions of dollars trying to get through those walls. Hired lawyers, investigators, lobbyists. He was my 14th client when he brought me on 5 years ago. Vincent pulled out a folder so thick it could have been a novel. 3 years ago, I found them, Margaret and Daniel. But when Theodore tried to approach, they threatened lawsuits. Harassment claims. Restraining orders. They knew Adam. They knew someone wanted you. And they made sure you never found out. My body went hot with rage. Margaret and Daniel had known. For years, someone had been searching for me, loving me from a distance, and they'd hidden it, just to keep their subsidy checks rolling in. Vincent's voice softened. The plan was to bring you together the day you turned 18, when they no longer had legal authority over you. But he suffered a heart attack. March 13th, 2 days before your birthday. March 13th. While I'd been stacking oil filters at the shop, wondering whether I'd get even a single candle on my cake, my father had been collapsing at his desk, still trying to find me. There's more, Vincent said, standing. We need to go to the lawyer's office. There are documents you need to see. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Documents? I live in a shelter. I have 1 pair of shoes, both with holes. What decisions do I get to make? Theodore left everything to you, Vincent said plainly. All of it. Every account, every property, every share in his company. You're his heir, Adam. You're about to be one of the wealthiest young men in Texas. For a moment, the world tilted. I looked down at the very steps of the library where I'd spent countless afternoons filling out job applications, begging for fast food shifts, and being turned down for having a diploma when they preferred someone desperate enough not to quit. And now I was supposed to believe I'd inherited an empire? I don't understand, I whispered. He didn't know me. I could have been anyone. I could have turned out awful. Vincent met my eyes. You were his son. That was enough. He told me often, I don't need to know him to love him. I've loved him since the day I lost him. The drive to the law office felt like I'd stepped into another reality. Vincent's car smelled of leather and fresh coffee. The vents blew chilled air without rattling. Classical music hummed from the radio. Nothing like the buses I used to take, where I prayed deodorant would last and hoped no one noticed the faint smell of the shelter on my clothes. He never stopped talking about you, Vincent said as we passed through Dallas's glossy towers and green spaces I'd never seen. Every meeting ended with, "Any progress on Adam?" The board used to joke that Brennan Energy was just an 18-year treasure hunt to find you. Did he know? I asked quietly. Did he know how I was living? He knew they were getting subsidies for keeping you, Vincent said. It crushed him. He even offered to pay them 10 times what the state gave them, just to meet you once. They refused. Said it would harm your well-being. The word well-being rang in my head. Margaret's cold, clinical excuse. She'd reduced my existence to a ledger entry and called it care. The law office towered above the city, 40 stories of glass I'd walked past hundreds of times, but never dared to enter. The elevator ride was smooth, silent, like ascending into a place where people wore shoes without holes and futures weren't up for sale. The conference room had walls of glass overlooking Dallas, stretching to the horizon. Somewhere far below was the shelter cot I'd been grateful to call mine just that morning. A woman in a sharp suit greeted me. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice respectful in a way that startled me. "Please sit. I'm Miss Chun. We have much to cover." On the table was a sealed envelope, my father's name written across it in a hand that shook but still pressed firmly. "This was written the morning he passed," Miss Chun said. "He insisted it be placed directly in your hands." My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside were 3 handwritten pages, every line written in hurried, uneven strokes, as if time itself had been chasing him. A small brass key slipped out with the letter, dangling from a tag etched with an address. I unfolded the letter, the words blurring as I tried to focus. "My son, if you're holding this, then I failed to find you myself. I pray that at least someone found you. Your mother, Emily, died the day you came into this world. She was my heart, my compass. You have her smile, though you may never have seen it. I was 22, grieving and weak. My parents told me I couldn't raise you alone. They already had an agency lined up, already had a couple prepared. I signed in confusion, in grief, in fear. Within a week, regret consumed me. I stopped reading, my chest tight, the words swimming. Miss Chin quietly slid a box of tissues toward me. By the time I tried to undo it, you were already gone, hidden behind sealed records the state refused to open. I fought every way I could. Lawyers, investigators. I even bribed court clerks once. Cost me dearly in legal trouble, but I would have paid 10 times over if it meant seeing you. That key unlocks a vault at the address written below. Inside is everything I collected, every file, every receipt, every letter I tried to send you but couldn't. It is the story of how I searched for you, Adam. The paper trembled in my hands. For the first time in 18 years, I held proof, undeniable, unshakable, that I had been wanted all along. Every birthday gift he had bought, but never wrapped in my hands. Every letter he had written, but never mailed. Every trace of his voice captured in ink and paper. That was what I found in the vault. The letter from him continued, and with each line my chest grew tighter. Your mother's name was Emily Carter. I gave her last name to one of my oil fields, the Carter Reserve, discovered on the day you would have turned 16. It's the most profitable field in the company, and I named it so you would never be forgotten. I built an empire hoping the noise would reach you somehow, that one day you'd hear me calling. Every contract, every deal, every sleepless night was fueled by the thought that maybe this would be the move that brought you back to me. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to keep you. I'm sorry I wasn't quick enough to find you. But I never stopped loving you. Not one single day. The wealth I'm leaving isn't just money. It's 18 years of apologies in the only form I knew how to give. Vincent drove me to the address written on the brass tag. From the outside, the place looked like any other warehouse in Houston's industrial sprawl, gray, windowless, forgettable. But inside, after 3 separate security checkpoints, I stepped into a room that almost knocked the air from my lungs. The walls were lined top to bottom with binders, photos, and reports. Private investigator files stacked in boxes. Age progression sketches charting what I might look like at 5, 10, 15. Newspaper clippings with my name circled in red. Honor roll announcements, yearbook lists, even a grainy photo of me from a school paper. He had been so close, so many times. In the center of the room sat rows of gifts. 18 years of birthday presents, neatly wrapped and labeled. A toy fire truck with a tag that read, "Every boy should have a truck." A baseball glove marked age 9 with a note, "I would have taught you to catch." A set of car keys tied to 16. Your first car, a Mustang, just like the one your mother adored. Somewhere, in storage, that car was waiting. But it was the desk that gutted me. Hundreds of letters, arranged by year. I opened one at random. Age 13. Adam, today you're 13. I wonder if you like science. At your age, I loved chemistry before I discovered petroleum engineering. I hope someone is teaching you to throw a curveball. I hope someone tells you they're proud of you. I am. I bought your school photo from an online site. Your eyes look thoughtful, serious. Your mother had that same look when she was focused. I carry your picture into every meeting. The board thinks I'm crazy, pulling out a boy's photo during million-dollar negotiations. But you remind me why I'm building all of this. It's all for you. Tears blurred the page. Vincent stayed silent near the door as I moved from letter to letter, reading a father's love that had never reached me. Then I found the folder that split my chest open. Failed adoption recovery, Walker family. Inside were legal papers, emails, court correspondence. He had found me 3 years ago. He had tried to reach me, sent letters, even showed up at the house once. Margaret and Daniel answered with lawyers, threats of harassment charges, even a restraining order. There were photos of my house, of me walking to school, of me climbing into Daniel's truck for work. My father had been there, watching from a distance, barred by law from stepping closer. One email stood out, highlighted. From Margaret to his lawyer. Mr. Brennan's interference is destabilizing to our family. Adam is thriving under our care and does not need the confusion of contact with a biological parent. Any further attempts will result in criminal action. Our monthly subsidies from the state are irrelevant and should not be interpreted as our motivation to maintain custody. She had known. She had known everything, and she had buried it to keep her checks coming. At the bottom of the folder sat a USB drive, labeled Final Message. Vincent opened a laptop. My father's face appeared, dated a week before his death. He looked tired, worn, but fierce in his resolve. Adam, he began, his voice shaking. Tomorrow I fly to Dallas. Vincent confirmed you'll be 18, finally free of the Walker's authority. After 18 years, I'll meet my son. I've practiced what to say, but I'll probably just cry. I hope you can forgive my weakness as a young man. I hope we can build something with the time we have left. I booked us a table at a restaurant for your birthday, somewhere nice, with chocolate cake. I never got to see you blow out candles. I never got to make wishes with you. But I've saved 18 years of wishes, and they all say the same thing. Bring my boy home. I love you, son. This time, nothing will stop me. The timestamp read March 12th, 11:47 p.m. 6 hours later, he collapsed at his desk, holding a plane ticket and my photo in his hands. I sat in that vault surrounded by unopened gifts, unsent letters, and the evidence of a love I had never been allowed to feel. It wasn't just Margaret and Daniel who had robbed me. It was timing, law, fate. My father's heart gave out 2 days before our reunion. There's one more matter, Ms. Chun said when we returned to the office. She slid a tablet across the table. The estate valuation. The numbers made me dizzy. Brennan Energy, valued at over $90 million. For homes across Texas, each fully paid. A private island off the Gulf Coast purchased the year I turned 10, named Walker Island after the name he believed I carried. Liquid investments of $30 million more. It's all yours, Mr. Brennan, she said softly. Mr. Brennan. The name caught in my chest. For the first time in my life, I had a name tied not to obligation, but to choice. I'm 19 now. CEO of an oil company I barely understand. Still learning to navigate boardrooms filled with men who once answered to my father. They've become my mentors, telling me stories about him I'll never get to live myself. How he chased down leads across the country on weekends. How he carried my photos in his wallet. How he built every deal on the dream of finding me. The mansions felt wrong at first, empty, hollow. I kept one, the house where he lived, leaving his room untouched. His cologne still lingers on the dresser. His glasses rest on a book about adoption law reform, forever waiting for him to finish. I sit in his study sometimes, talking aloud like he's still there, telling him about the company, about my day, about the life his love made possible. The other 3 estates are no longer empty. They're transitional housing now, for kids like me, who aged out of foster care with nothing but a trash bag of clothes. The Dallas shelter where I once slept on a cot that smelled of bleach now receives enough money each month to make sure no one there goes hungry. I was given the fortune of a man I never met, but more than that, I was given proof that I was wanted, that I had been loved all along. And with that, I finally understood my father's last lesson. Money builds walls, but love tears them down. And I had 18 years of love to carry forward.